that you would have women business owners in the limousine industry. And they discovered that 85% of the limousine industry in the States is 1 to 5 car operators. We have this vision of these large fleets of limo owners. And so we're going to take the same approach as far as for you. They're going to get to meet you. They're going to get to know the hard work that you as regulators do and the things that you have to deal with as regulators. But that means that not only are we going to need to have you, if we have a legislative agenda, not only are we going to need you on the Down the Hill in November, but we're going to need you during the year for some of you to come to Washington for individual meetings. Now, my role is think of as an orchestra conductor. And as you know, the orchestra conductor is responsible for helping bring in the instruments at the right time. That's what all of you are, whether, you would think of as the drum section, the violins, the flutes, whatever. And so I will be helping direct to bring you in at the right time. Because even though 42 years I have built up some major relationships in Washington, nothing comes close to the fact that you're the constituent. You represent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Because remember what I said yesterday when we were doing our session. The two keys are you represent the public in terms of making sure they get service and that they are in safe vehicles. So you have a constituency base that is very large. And members of Congress or the state legislature, they think in terms of numbers. So you have access to numbers that they do not necessarily have. So when we come to you, we'll be able to say to you, whether you're from the state of California, because I had talked to Tom Driscoll and Jim Scott, we were starting to look at the California delegation and who's on the House Transportation Committee. From New York, there are key people who are like Jerry Nadler, who are on the Transportation Committee. So we'd be coming to Mr. Volo. From, where is Caesar? There are members from the Florida delegation, including the most important person in the world for our industry. Micah is from Florida. He's from the greater Orlando area, and he is the chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Caesar, as a Floridian, can help carry the water with me as the orchestra conductor. And that's what's going to be important. So we're going to need your help and your commitment. You've got my commitment, and I will give you my time and my energy to make sure that the IATR establishes a strong presence and that we get our legislation through and that we meet our agenda. So both helping you politically and helping you with our legislative agenda. Now, I put on your tables, by the way, there was just thing, because there's just no way we can do an exercise right now. But we are going to do a training workshop in Washington, and also we may do some, Karen, during the year to get people really prepared so that they can truly help represent your interests. I'm authored in a book called Lobbying and Influence. You know how they have those things, computers for dummies, books and those things? This is, you're not dummies, but this is one of those books. In fact, the University of Cincinnati is apparently going to be using it as a textbook. But it's a how-to, and it walks you through everything from how to do letters to the editor, how to put together a fact sheet, how to, in fact, testify. So we will have a lot of fun together, and so I'm looking forward to an exciting year with all of you, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John Nunziato.
Thank you very much, Barry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to begin by congratulating Matt and Karen and the City of Toronto, especially the licensing division, municipal licensing, for putting on such a great conference. I'm truly impressed with the nature of this conference and the very busy agenda you have, and I find it to be very educational. Now, I was asked to respond and speak to a Canadian legislative agenda. Barry has spoken about an American legislative agenda. But firstly, I'd like to know how many Canadian regulators are in the room. So if you could just put up your hands. Okay, we have a fair number. I've made another observation. I don't know if this is unique to this particular conference, but regulators, transportation regulators, seem to be predominantly male, Karen. Is there a reason for that? I also represent the petroleum industry, and that's a male-dominated industry. But in any event, I'm pleased to be here. I've been in, as Barry pointed out, in elected office for 20 years. I was elected when I was very young. I was, in fact, in second-year law. And so I served 4 years at the municipal level. So many of you, or many of your counterparts at the time, sat at committee. And I know many of you have to attend committee hearings to listen to the politicians talk about various matters and issues. In the 16 years that I was in Ottawa, as a member of Parliament, I was on the government side for a number of years and then in opposition. And Barry, you might be a registered independent, but I was an elected independent. I actually ran as an independent in 1997 and I was elected. And in the history of our country, there's just a handful of individuals that have been elected. So I was deeply honored by my constituents to have me elected as their representative as an independent. But in the 16 years I was in Ottawa, I was able to ascertain what is effective and what is ineffective when it comes to lobbying. I was lobbied by all kinds of groups and organizations and individuals. And I came to the conclusion very early on that what's effective is relationship building. It's all about relationship building in politics. So politicians in the US and politicians in Canada speak the same language. In the years that I was in government, both on the opposition and government side, very rarely did I hear in caucus, behind closed doors, the phrase, the public interest. In other words, let's do this because of the public interest. It's good for the public. You would hear that periodically. But the major, and I'm being somewhat of a cynic right now, but the major driving force behind what politicians do is the desire to get reelected. The desire to get reelected. And so that's what makes lobbying so important, is because politicians are asked to support different pieces of legislation because it will enhance their persona, their candidacy when election time comes along. But I have found that whatever interest that you're pursuing as a lobbyist, it's important that you have to ensure that there is the public interest is being served. It's very difficult to ask a politician to do, or a political party to do something that will only serve the individual or the party. You have to ensure that what you're advocating also serves the public interest. So I guess as far as the transportation regulators are concerned in Canada, we have a different system, Barry, as you know, than in the U.S. We have a parliamentary system. We have 3 levels of jurisdiction, and with respect to transportation regulators, all 3 jurisdictions impact on what you do. The provincial and municipal level certainly more than the federal level. So at the federal level, there is some jurisdiction when it comes to importing vehicles into Canada, for example, transportation safety. There are other aspects of federal legislation, but somewhat limited. Where the power lies, or the jurisdiction lies, is with the provincial government. Municipalities in Canada are creatures of the province. The provincial government in Canada can eliminate municipalities. The municipal level of government can only legislate in areas where they are mandated to legislate. They don't have absolute jurisdiction. The provincial government, on a whim, can decide to get rid of municipalities, as they did in the city of Toronto. Not too long ago, there were 6 municipalities that in the area known as the city of Toronto today, and the provincial government decided to amalgamate those municipalities into one. So a lot of when we're talking about the Canadian legislative agenda, it's in each individual province, of course, where you need to have some influence at the provincial level. And then municipalities are given their jurisdiction. In many cases, municipalities are given jurisdiction to regulate the taxi industry. I have found through my discussions with various people over the last couple of days is that there's certain areas that are unregulated. Even though you are regulated, and the transportation sector, the taxi and limousine sector, is highly regulated, there is no requirement, as I understand it, in the province of Ontario that a taxi driver has to be trained, has to go through any form of training. The City of Toronto does it. They have the jurisdiction to mandate it. The City of Ottawa and larger jurisdictions do. But there's no requirement provincially in Ontario, as I understand, that a taxi driver has to be mandated. Now, whether that should be on your legislative agenda, that's for you to decide. But I guess in order to come up with an agenda, a Canadian agenda, an Ontario or provincial agenda, you have to, we're seeking your input. So what legislative changes do you think are necessary in order for you to do your job more effectively in the public interest? What powers do you lack in order to do your job a lot better? I was discussing with several individuals today. My sister is a city councillor in Toronto, and she moved a motion. She's also on the licensing committee. And she moved a motion last year to mandate taxis to have child seats, baby seats in taxis. There's no requirement in the province of Ontario, certainly in the city of Toronto, for taxi drivers, brokerages, to ensure that there are car seats. Now, as a father of 3 children, my children are grown now, I find that unacceptable that a parent can get into a taxi and not be required to restrain that child in a car seat. And as I said to some individuals, all it would take would be one death, one child death in the province of Ontario, and believe me,